Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here this morning for Kabbalah Cafe. This is lesson number 300. We welcome everyone today, and we're ready to study. What I'm going to do is, of course, just mute everyone just to start our class, and then, of course, as we through some intervals, we'll open up for questions and give everyone a chance to participate. Okay, so thank you everyone for joining us this morning, for being here. And there's a story told about a fellow who goes into the bar every afternoon, and he always has 2 glasses of scotch. And then after he has his 2 glasses of scotch, he has this terrible habit in which he picks up one of the glasses and he throws it at the bartender. And then a few moments later, he catches himself and he feels terrible and he apologizes profusely and he feels terribly guilty about it. But this goes on every single day. Eventually, the bartender tells him, this can no longer go on. This is just unacceptable behavior. You need to go get some help. And once you've got yourself worked out, go to therapy, get yourself worked out, then you can come back to the bar. A few months later, he comes back to the bar. Bartender says, hope everything has been worked out. He says, yes. He orders his 2 drinks. And then, of course, right after his second drink, he takes this glass and he hurls it. He throws it at the bartender. So the bartender says to him, I thought you went to therapy. He says, I did. I no longer feel guilty anymore. So in society today, unfortunately, a lot of people are throwing things at each other. There's a lot of toxicity when you get out there sometimes in society, and people are throwing all sorts of things at each other, mostly verbal. But it is important that we try to think about how we can grow in our love and respect of others. This is the theme of this week in Judaism. This is the week that we mourn the destruction of the Second Temple. And we mourn all that is, in a sense, dysfunctional about the world we live in. On a grander state level. And really, Judaism understands that all the ills of society can be rooted back to the lack of love and respect that one human being has for another. And if we can somehow improve and change and transform the way we view and treat each other in society, of course, we will live in a transformed and better world. Of course, people can ask the question, how can I change all of society? And I'm always reminded of the story of the great Hasidic rabbi that was once walking with his followers. And there was a newspaper reporter that sees him and sees this group of followers. And he was taken by the scene. And he says, who is this rabbi that you're all hovering around? And he says, this rabbi, he's a wonder rabbi. He's a wonder rabbi. He's a wonder rabbi. He can do wonders. So the newspaper reporter says, I'd like to get a interview with him. So they go to interview the rabbi. The newspaper reporter interviews the rabbi. And he says, they say about you that you're a wonder rabbi. You're a miracle worker. Can you expound on what does it mean to be a wonder rabbi? So he says, I'll tell you. He says, you have a rabbi of a synagogue. The rabbi of the synagogue, he directs and controls and leads all the people in the synagogue. He says, then you have the rabbi of a town. Sometimes you have the chief rabbi of a town. He controls all the rabbis of all the synagogues, all the people in the entire town. And then you can have the rabbi of a state, of a province, and he controls all the rabbis and all the people in the whole province. And then you can have a chief rabbi of a country. Chief rabbi of a country, he's controlling and overseeing all the activities and all the Jewish people in the entire country. And then he says, then you have the wonder rabbi. And he says, okay. He says, the wonder rabbi, he controls himself. So it's a lot easier, of course, to tell other people what they have to do, to read the news and have opinions about what everyone else should be doing. But really, the greatest wonder in life is to change ourselves. It's the hardest thing to do. And the greatest achievement is when we change ourselves. And when we change ourselves, this has a ripple effect. When we change ourselves, then the people around us are changed. and they're inspired. And then through them, other people are inspired. So the most powerful way in which we change the world is to look inwards and to change ourselves. As we know that Abraham, we're told, is probably one of the most influential human beings of all time, Abraham, our forefather. And God tells him he's a man who changed the entire landscape of the world, the spiritual landscape of the world. And he's the spiritual patriarch of the world. And yet the first message God tells him is, go to you. That's the literal translation of the first message that God tells Abraham, not go to the land of Israel. He says, go lecha, to you. In other words, the journey that Abraham has to take is an inward journey within himself. Change yourself, work on yourself. And when you change yourself and you work on yourself, this is the greatest way in which you can impact and change all of society. So when we talk about learning to have the need for greater love, respect for one human being for another, it starts with ourselves. Not necessarily what we have in mind and what others need to do, but it starts with ourselves. So in Kabbalah, there are multiple teachings that are very, very helpful in learning how to have greater love and respect for people around us. And of course, it starts within our own homes, sometimes in our own families. Many of us are spending right now, a little bit more time. Many of us are spending more time with our family members in our homes. And as someone said, it's a time in which to learn to like the people you love, because that's not always so easy. And it requires sometimes a little effort, but we can talk about some ideas, some concepts, that Kabbalah has in helping us achieve that. One of those ideas is based on the concept of the numerical value. The numerical value, just give me a moment here, if I can find something here. Give me one moment to see if this has worked. Okay, so I'm going to have to do this via showing it to you physically on my screen. I wasn't able to create a share screen for this, but I want to talk about we talked last week for a few minutes about numerical value. And in Kabbalah, letters are very important. The letters, the Hebrew letters, have a lot of depth and meaning. They represent godly energy. When you look at a Hebrew word, Hebrew word is more than just a tag, a name tag for something. It is actually telling you the spiritual makeup of something. So as I said last week, when you say the word mayim in Hebrew, which means water, the word mayim is actually more closely related to H2O than it is to the word water. Just like H2O is actually telling you what is in the water, it's telling you the nature of the water, what its components are. When you look at the Hebrew letters that make up words, they're not just a word, it's actually telling you the spiritual makeup of that item. It is very specific, and therefore every aspect of it is meaningful. And especially also, we're told numbers, as we mentioned last time, the numerical value. So hopefully you can be able to see some of this. I'm not sure if you're going to be able to. What I'm showing you here, are you able to see it? No, not really. Okay, so I'm going to have to do this verbally. Okay, the word in Hebrew for love, and you can take notes of this if you want. The word for love is ahava. Ahava is the word love. There are many words for love in Hebrew, just because there are many different types and nuances when we talk about love, different types of love. But in the most standard form, the word for love is ahava. It is spelled with the Hebrew letter aleph, the Hebrew letter hey, the Hebrew letter vet or bet, and the Hebrew letter hey again. That's how you spell ahava. Aleph and the hey and the vet and the hey. In numerical value, when we talk about numerical values, the aleph is 1. So if anyone here can do some basic math, just remember, or you can note down these numbers. The aleph is 1, the hey is 5, the vet is 2, and the hey is 5. So that's 1 plus 5 plus 2 plus 5. And that equals 13. So the numerical value for the word love in Hebrew is 13. It totals 13. That's what the Kabbalah says. That's what the numbers equal. Aleph is 1. It's the first letter of the alphabet. Hey is the 5th letter, so it's number 5. Bet is the 2nd letter. And hey is the 5th letter again. So 1 plus 5 plus 2 plus 5 is 13. In Hebrew, there is another word that has the numerical value of 13. In Hebrew, if you want to say one, like God is one, the word we use is echad. Echad, like we say in the end of the Shema, right? Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu Hashem, echad. Echad means one. That's what the word means. It's the meaning of the word. The numerical value of the word echad, because it's a word, so if you take the numerical value, it's aleph, which is 1, chet, which is 8, and daled, which is 4. Okay, so 1 plus 8 plus 4 is 13. So in other words, the word for one has a numerical value of 13. Again, not to get confused. It's the word that we use to describe one, but the word that we use to describe one has a numerical value of 13. So both the word love and the word one has the same numerical value. What Kabbalah says this is trying to tell us is that love comes through an understanding, through a perspective where you begin to see others as intrinsically one with you. They're not others, really. They are a part, an extension of yourself. They're an extension of yourself because we all come from the same soul. We all come from one big soul, all humanity, all people, all come from the same soul. In fact, it says that Adam and Eve had like a general soul, and all our souls are little souls that come from that general soul, which is, by the way, one of the reasons why when God created the world, he only created one man and one woman, unlike other species that you read about in Genesis, where God created a multitude of each one of the species. When it comes to mankind, there's only one man and one woman. And the idea being that that means all humanity come from the same man and all of humanity, no matter which race, which ethnicity, which religion, everyone comes from the same man and woman. And the concept behind that is we're all intrinsically one. We're all intrinsically an extension of the same human beings, the same soul. We're all part of the same family. And that's how you achieve that concept, that idea, which of course requires meditation and reflection, and you need to think about that and internalize that, is how we get to a place where we can love others as ourselves. In other words, if you think about it, when it's sometimes hard to respect, or sometimes hard, for example, not to be jealous or envious of someone else. But I always say to people generally are not jealous or envious of their children, for example. In fact, every person, I would imagine, that is on this Zoom meeting today would love their children to do better than them. That's our greatest wish. We want our children to be more successful than we are in every facet of life. We would never say, "Oh, I'm so jealous and envious, and it bothers me to see my child be so successful." On the contrary, the more successful they are, the more happy we are. In fact, we get to a place with our children, of course, that their happiness is our happiness. If they're happy, I'm happy. If they're in pain, I'm in pain. Why? Because we don't see our children as other. We see them as an extension of ourselves. They're part of us. Their happiness is my happiness. They're my pain. So says Kabbalah that we can learn to have this kind of relationship with other human beings in general. When we begin to understand that they are an extension of ourselves, every human being is part of the same one soul. And in truth, their pain is my pain. Their happiness is my happiness. I don't have to be jealous, or I don't in any way have to feel negative about other people's success and so on and so forth. I don't have to begrudge their successes because they're mine. They're part of my success. They and myself are one. So of course, this is an idea that is not natural. It doesn't come to us naturally. With our children, it comes to us naturally, which tells us that it can be done, so that we know that the concept can exist. We can learn to love people as an extension of ourselves. But Kabbalah says that that's why the word love in Hebrew is the same numerical value as the word one, because that is the underlying concept and theme, that it's understanding the oneness within humanity that is critical. But there is another perspective that I'd like to share. First of all, I'm going to unmute to see if anyone has any questions on that so far. I'm sorry I wasn't able to share that screen with the numerical value. It didn't work for me today. It's one of those days. But if anyone has any questions on the concept so far.
Shall I?
Okay, so I'm going to mute again, and then we will continue with the next layer.
It unmuted us.
Okay, so the next piece here, the next level that we should be aware about, is really comes to us through a different conversation. In other words, we're going to come back to the concept of love, but it comes to us via a different conversation. And that is that one of the spiritual challenges that Kabbalah talks about is when a person feels a lack of motivation. Spiritually, a person is not motivated. They are not inspired. They don't feel, they're not uplifted. They are spiritually lethargic. They're indifferent. And we are challenged because we want to grow. We would like to be better. We would like to do certain things, but we're just not motivated enough to do that. And so Kabbalah says that there are three possible reasons for this. Just like when a person deals with physical sicknesses and physical deficiencies, there could be different reasons for certain symptoms. When we're dealing with the spiritual symptom of a lack of motivation, when a person is spiritually lethargic and unmotivated and uninspired, there are three different possible reasons the Kabbalah says this could be. And for different people, it could be different reasons. One of them is that Kabbalah, it's, again, to take a step back, the reason why the basis of the Kabbalah's analysis of this is based on the idea that motivation is an emotional experience. It's our emotions. And generally speaking, we are in control of our emotions through our minds, because in Kabbalah, as we've said many times before, the mind, the intellect are referred to as parents, and the emotions are referred to as children. Just like parents are the ones that conceive and give birth to children, our minds and what we are thinking about in our minds and our viewpoint, our perspective, is what gives birth to our feelings, our emotions. That is what our emotions are. They are children that are born out of our mindset. So when a person, I can't help the way I feel, Kabbalah categorically rejects that idea. There's no such thing as I can't help the way I feel. It may be hard to change the way I feel. It may be these feelings are very strong and very hard to change, but it's always possible to change the way we feel, because if we change the way we think and the way we view something, it is going to change the way we feel. So it is important that we understand that concept. That's the Kabbalah's assumption. The Kabbalah comes with that assumption that we can change the way we feel by the way we think. So if we're uninspired, if we're not motivated, if we're emotionally kind of numb, right? We just can't get motivated. Kabbalah says that there are three possible reasons for this. One reason is that we don't have the right perspective. We don't have the right information. We just don't have the knowledge. We don't have the information that would get us inspired. You need perspective. Perspective requires a certain mind, a certain way of looking at something, a certain way of understanding something. So when we lack that perspective, then we are not able to get inspired. So one answer sometimes is just a matter of education. You have to learn. You have to read, learn, take classes, or whatever it may be, to gain the information that will give you the right perspective. So that's possibility number one, is just we're just ignorant of certain information. We're just not aware of certain information. When we become aware of certain information, it will change the way we feel, right? For example, if let's say you own, we always use this example because I think a lot of people can relate to this, and there's a visceral reaction to something. Let's say you own a lot of a certain stock in the stock market, and the stock plunges and loses 50% of its value in a certain day, right? Now, before you become aware of that, let's say no one's told you, you just don't know. You haven't read it. You didn't see the news. No one's given you that information. You go about your day and you're feeling fine. What happens when you read about it in the paper? or you read about it on the internet, or someone tells you, your broker calls you and says, by the way, I have some bad news, whatever it may be, what happens then? You start to have some feelings. Usually those feelings are not very good feelings, not positive feelings, usually. So what happens? Why were you not having feelings a few minutes ago? Now you have feelings. And the answer is simple, because you didn't have the information before. Now you have the information. Your mind was not aware of it. We're not aware. So sometimes when a person is not feeling motivated, it might be, Kabbalah says, that you just don't have enough information that could motivate you. If you learn the right things, understand the right things, and have the right perspective, that information may be what's needed in order to motivate you, make you feel a certain way. So that's possibility number one. Possibility number two is that it is a possibility that a person's lack of excitement is that they have the knowledge, they have the information, but the information is abstract, and it's not something that they've been able to make personal, and they've not been able to connect with the information in an emotionally meaningful way. When I say an emotionally meaningful way, in other words, there's a lot of things that we know, but it doesn't necessarily have any emotional meaning to us. It doesn't mean anything to me. It's not something personal. It doesn't relate to me. So it's just information. It's just stuff. It doesn't make me feel a certain way. So they, in Hasidic teachings, they give the example of a peasant who's unfortunately illiterate, and he receives a letter. And this letter, unfortunately, has got some sad news that some relative of his, a parent, has passed on. But he cannot read, so he brings it to the rabbi to read the letter for him. And the rabbi reads the letter, and when the rabbi reads the letter, he reads the sad news that this peasant's relative has passed on. And when the peasant hears the news, the peasant faints. And the question that Hasidus asks is, the person who first knew the information, the person who first read the information, was the rabbi. He's the one who knows it first before he tells it to the peasant. So why is it that the peasant faints and not the rabbi? And of course, the answer is simple. The answer is because it's not the rabbi's relative, it's the peasant's relative. In other words, the information and how it affects us has to do with how personal, how meaningful it is to me, what it means to me, how it relates to me. If it's just abstract information about someone else, about something else, and it doesn't relate to me, then it's very hard for me to have an emotional response. So sometimes, says the Kabbalah, it is possible that we have information, we have knowledge, but we've not been able to make it personal. It's just abstract. We're aware, you talk to people about God and God's presence, or the fact that God is part of our lives every day on a daily basis in every aspect of life, or whatever it may be, something that actually, when you stop to think about it and actually contemplate what that means to you in your life, could be awe-inspiring. But the reason why it's not giving you that emotional response is that we have it as just information, but it's abstract, and we haven't been able to, we haven't connected with that information. So Kabbalah says sometimes what we need to do is take ideas that we already know and actually focus our minds on those ideas. We have to think about them for a period of time. It's called meditation. Kabbalistic meditation is not an experience where you empty your mind of everything, which is done in some disciplines. In Kabbalah, meditation means that you take a concept, an idea that you already know, and you focus your mind and think about it at length, not learning anything new. It's not about learning something new. It's about contemplating and meditating that idea for a few minutes, thinking about how it relates to you, what that means in your life, and thereby bridging the gap between the intellect and the emotions. It's bringing the intellect and downloading it into your emotions. It needs a download. Now, some information doesn't require a lot of download. Like, again, knowing that you've lost 50% of your value in a certain stock, it doesn't require a lot of work to download that. We hear it and boom, there's an emotional response. But some information is a little bit more abstract, and it requires an effort to actually meditate, think about it, reflect on it, and then we get an emotional response. And you see this with many things in life. In other words, if you ask someone, are you aware of the fact that your spouse, for example, has these and these wonderful qualities, right? And they might say, yes, I do. So why are you not feeling that way? The answer is because maybe I haven't really contemplated and meditated about those things for a while. And if I actually took the time to think about it, contemplate it consciously, say I'm going to spend the next 5 minutes thinking about all the wonderful qualities of my spouse, and what that means to me. If you spent 5 minutes doing so, you would come away from those 5 minutes feeling a certain feeling differently. You'd feel a certain appreciation, a certain sense of love, or whatever it may be, to that person. And the same thing is with much of the information we have. We have a lot of information sometimes. So again, this is problem number two. The first problem could be that we don't have the information. Second problem is we have the information, but we haven't taken the time to download it, to connect with the information in a meaningful way that actually can inspire some kind of emotional response. That is reason number two. Reason number three, says the Kabbalah, of why we might not be motivated is it could be we have all the information. It could be we've been working on trying to contemplate and meditate and download, and we're still not getting an emotional response. We're still not getting we just still can't get motivated. It's just not getting us anywhere. So Kabbalah says there is another possibility of what might be going wrong, what's not working. And the Kabbalah says that is that the ego that the person has is so coarse and so smug and comfortable in its own kind of place that it's hard to get it going. It's hard to inspire it. The example that the Zohar in the Kabbalah, the book the Zohar gives, he says it's like you've got a match, and this match represents the light, the fire, that's spiritual inspiration. If you take that match and try with a match to light a massive log of wood, anyone who knows that, if you take a massive log of wood and you try to hold a little match to it, what's going to happen? Nothing. You can't light a log of wood on fire with a tiny match. It's not going to work. If all you've got is that match, what you're going to need to do is break down the wood into smaller pieces. You need to break down the wood into smaller pieces, and when the wood is in smaller pieces, now I can take my match and it can light the one small piece, and then from there the fire can grow. And the idea being is that when the ego is too smug, it's too comfortable, it's too coarse, sometimes the spiritual motivation cannot inspire it. The spiritual ideas are not going to be able to inspire it, because again, you're dealing with this big log of coarseness of ego. And so Kabbalah says what has to happen is that this ego has to be broken down a little bit. A person has to be humbled. A person has to be broken down. To give an example from the world of recovery, for example, even if for those of us that are not necessarily on that journey on a conscious level, but the idea being sometimes you have someone who's an addict in some way, to whatever it may be, and they have the information, they know that this is not a good behavior, that this is self-destructive. Not only do they know it, they've thought about it to the point where they know that they're destroying their families, destroying their relationships, they're destroying their lives. They get it. They totally get it. If you ask them, do you understand what you're doing and the significance of what you're doing? Yes, but they can't change. And they're just in this cycle of never-ending change until they hit rock bottom. Because when they hit rock bottom, they get broken. It's very painful. But what happens when they hit rock bottom is that they become broken. And when you break down the ego, when a person's broken, then there is the possibility for the light to begin to shine through, because the ego has been broken and shattered. Now the light can shine through, and we can begin to see real change, where a person can get inspired and motivated enough to actually make change in their life. So that's the Kabbalah says is reason number three. Sometimes we need to humble ourselves. We need to be humbled in order to achieve the allowing this light to go through. In the world of recovery, we talk about hitting rock bottom. Kabbalah says there is that possibility in life. Life can hit you so hard in a sense that you hit rock bottom. You can lose relationships, or you can, whatever it may be, wherever your spiritual ills might lead to. But there is also, and by the way, we can talk about that concept in health, right? A lot of people talk about knowing that they should be more careful in how they eat or take care of their health with exercise. And they know it, and they talk about it, and they know it's right, and they're aware of it. They know what the consequences might be if they don't. But for many people, it takes a medical emergency, unfortunately, right? Or something that their doctor says to scare them to get them to change. There's got to be something to break the person down to get to that place of change. So in Kabbalah, we say we don't necessarily have to wait till life breaks us, but that we can work on humbling ourselves. And when we humble ourselves, that will allow the light to go through. So one of the ways in which Kabbalah says we can humble ourselves is to actually see how small and insignificant we are vis-a-vis other people. So the Kabbalah says what we should do is we should look at certain people in society, for example, that we have a very low opinion of, that we're very, that we see them with a certain sense of disgust, or a certain sense of, we have a negative image of that individual because of certain moral and ethical deficiencies that that person has. So you look at someone who's morally and ethically lacking, and you feel that that person is not a good person. So Kabbalah says, if you actually take the time to realize that they are better than you, not that you shouldn't judge them, but they are actually better than, possibly better than you, this could be a very, very humbling thought, because you look at that person and you realize that that person is morally and ethically compromised, and then you realize, actually, I might be lower than they are. That thought, when we actually understand it and contemplate it in reality, can be very humbling. How would we feel that way? Well, Kabbalah says, being that we have no idea what that person's inner soul is like. Every person has a godly soul and an animal soul, but you have no idea what the animal soul of that person is like, and what its cravings and what its weaknesses are. And it could be that if you had been given that animal soul, you would be a lot worse than that individual. Or, put it differently, it could be that because of that person's animal soul and the circumstances of their life and their upbringing, it could be the battle they have to fight just to maintain that very low moral and ethical standard. The battle they have just to get there and to be that may be way more than you are battling every day to be the person you have to be, or to grow in your life. It could be the fight they have to fight just to be who they are, maybe way more than you're fighting. So really, relatively speaking, when we talk about each person being given their own animal soul and their own set of circumstances in life, what's important is the fight. How hard are you fighting? How hard are you struggling in order to grow, in order to maintain your level, in order to grow? And when we begin to realize that some of the people that we look at in society that we have a very negative, generally a negative opinion of, that it could be their battle, and what they are doing to be who they are is way more than what we are doing, that thought can be very humbling. That thought, and when we contemplate that, can actually bring our ego down, where we feel kind of smug with who we are. We're kind of comfortable with who we are. We say, well, I'm a decent guy, I'm a decent person, morally and ethically a decent human being, so I'm just not motivated enough to change, not motivated enough to make any changes. But when we begin to contemplate that we may be lower than even the lowest in some ways, because the fight they may have to put in vis-a-vis the fight that we are putting in, this might actually lead us to a tremendous sense of humility that really humbles us and breaks down our ego. That is what it says in the ethics of our fathers, and it's just a basic, don't judge a person until you are in their place. What does it mean to be in their place? It means to have their animal soul, to have their upbringing, to be faced with their temptations and set of circumstances, and to have to fight their fight. Can you say that in your life, which is obviously a very different life in which you are not dealing with the same challenges and the same ethical and moral challenges, but are you in your life, in your context, putting in that type of fight? How hard are you fighting to be who you are, or to try to improve and change? And when we actually think about that in an honest way, that thought can actually lead to a tremendous amount of humility. It can break down the ego. It can make us realize how small and insignificant we are and how much we really need to change. And that is the way in which we can actually lower the ego and thereby come with change. But that concept, and again, I'll take questions after this, that concept also can be very helpful in learning to be less judgmental of others, and thereby allow us to be able to develop respect and love, even for people who are morally and ethically, in our opinions, insufficient. It doesn't mean, again, I always have to clarify, that doesn't mean that we condone morally and ethically compromised behavior. when someone behaves immorally and when someone behaves unethically, it needs to be called out and it needs to be dealt with. We can't just say, oh, wow, we have to accept everyone and everything or all behaviors. The behavior is not a good behavior. But the question is, does that make me intrinsically better than that person? Not necessarily. We have no idea if we are intrinsically better than that person. It could be the fight they've put in to be who they are, as compromised as it is a lot more than the fight we have put in to be who we are. And therefore, that allows us to be humble in front of every person. And that's what the Torah wants us to do, is that even while we, on the one hand, take to task certain behaviors and people for certain behaviors, at the same time, we never feel intrinsically superior to other human beings. We can learn to be less judgmental. And as being less judgmental, this will allow us to be more open to developing positive feelings for other people. When we are judgmental of others, it's very hard to feel positively about them. When we learn to overcome that sense of judgment, we can learn to be more positive about other people. And this is, of course, very, very important in our society in this time, when we sometimes see other people, because of our perspective, as being as lacking integrity and lacking certain morals and ethics, to learn to be less judgmental, more open to them, more understanding, and thereby a greater love and respect. Just one moment, hold on. Sorry, we just have to work out some internal issues here. We've got them worked out. So that is the concept of how we again can become motivated, even when we are have the knowledge and have the information and have worked on downloading it, and the ego is too coarse, so we can humble ourselves. But that same system can help us to become a little less judgmental. So I'll take some questions. If anyone has questions, then we'll go over the review sheets. If anyone has any questions or wants to clarify something, please share.
I
Yes.
have a question. So
Yes,
you're
Marsha.
saying that somebody like Jeffrey Epstein,
Yeah.
who did horrible acts, ruined so many lives, that we should not judge him, because we wouldn't look at a child and judge them and say a child is bad, their behavior is bad.
So again, first of all, I want to clarify that we don't always, with these classes, have to go to the extremes. There are extremes in society, which again, make it very, very hard when you're dealing with extremes. Thank God, most of us on a daily basis don't have to deal with people of that nature. We're dealing with just, people in our communities, people in our businesses that we might have a negative opinion of because of certain immoral or unethical or just not so positive behavior. And we don't necessarily have to take this concept to the extreme. In truth, again, do you know what kind of soul he had? Do you know what kind of temptations he had? Do you know what you would have done with his upbringing, with his soul, with his, I don't know, it's hard to know. We might say, no, I would definitely do better, but do you really know their soul? Do you really know the depth of their struggles? It's impossible for you to really know. So on the one hand, the behavior is totally something that that society cannot tolerate, that behavior, and that behavior needs to be dealt with. But the question is, what would you be if you had his upbringing, his animal soul, his struggles, do you know? There's no way for you to really know. Again, it's the two things. The behavior cannot be tolerated. It's something that we have to get, we cannot allow for that. There's no room for that in a civilized society, to treat people in that way. There is no space for that. We can't allow for that. And there should be no room for that. But the question is it's more about the way you view yourself. We don't know the battle. Am I battling that hard? Am I fighting in my own world of trying to be more giving and trying to be more understanding and trying to be more patient and trying to be a better parent, a better spouse? Am I putting in that level of fight? Or is it, for me, these things kind of come easily. So it's just, I'm just kind of cruising along and doing my thing, and it kind of comes pretty comfortable. How much battle? Because all of this is defined by the amount of work that we are putting in to serve and to do our part. And again, it's harder when you're dealing with extremes, but I think for most of us, thank God, we don't have to deal with sociopaths, or I know some of us might think that some people in our lives are that way, but generally speaking, we don't deal with sociopaths. We don't deal with people of that nature. We deal with people that we are struggling to like and struggling to love and respect, because we're pretty judgmental of them. And this concept, this idea and perspective that Kabbalah gives us can help us overcome that tendency to be judgmental and critical.
So, Rabbi, I have a question.
Yes.
What do you think is in human nature? Because I'm thinking of the extremes. I mean, as soon as you were going through this talk, obviously I'm not the only one, but what is it about our mind that we immediately go to the extremes and think of those people that we do not know what their animal soul is? We do not know, but why do we jump to that instead of trying to keep it more of an intimate circle or our influential circle?
Right, because obviously, when you see something that stands out and it's glaring, when you're looking at a list of things and there's one that pops out, your eye is going to go to that which is kind of stands out. So in society, unfortunately, we have individuals that have done things that really, unfortunately, stand out for their unethical and immoral nature. That is human nature, but just to our eye gets kind of pulled in that direction. But what's important, again, is the people in our daily lives. So those are the people that we have to work on learning to have more respect for. It's the people in our communities, in our neighborhoods. It's the people in our social circles, whatever it is in society. It's more about learning to be less judgmental, because we do not know the battle that this person may be going through, and we have to ask ourselves, what kind of a battle am I putting in to be the person I am? Maybe for me, just to be who I am comes easy. Most of us don't wake up every day with this terrible desire to do something really immoral or unethical. We just don't have that. We just don't wake up with that desire. It's not in our thinking. So it's not a battle. For most of us to be decent people, it's not a battle. We have other battles. And the question is, in those battles, how hard are we fighting? Whatever those battles may be, in those battles. And that's really when we talk about how we judge other people, is how hard are they fighting? And am I fighting as hard? That person who's very immoral and unethical, they might be in some ways battling a lot more than I'm battling to be the person I am. And so it allows us to be humbled sometimes, and it allows us to be less judgmental and critical of others.
Rabbi.
Yes.
I really don't judge. I never have judged people, because I feel that we're all God's creation. I feel, though, many times that I'm being judged. They don't know the shoes I've been walking. And I just feel it's, well, I mean, I we all have baggage. While I give them the benefit of the doubt always and try to, to mediate and whatnot, I really feel that I'm not because it's for me, but I know their background. Everybody has baggage, but this particular person does not have that kind of baggage, but yet I'm being judged. Yeah. And so I'm trying to make them understand that all of us have baggage. So be kinder. And it's very hard when it's a one-sided relationship.
Yeah. So what's important to understand is that when you see other people being judgmental, you have to understand that that's their loss, because it's just it makes it much harder for them to have more love and respect for others. And a life in which you are constantly feeling critical and negative about others is a life in which you, the person who is being critical, is not as happy. So it's a lot happier existence to be loving and respectful of others. So when a person is judgmental, I can't change another person being judgmental other than, of course, share and teach. But that is their loss. Let me take a few moments here to share the screen and just to kind of see if we can go over the class today. Lesson 300, which is a milestone lesson, as we said last week. That means we've been doing the Kabbalah Cafe. This is our 300th lesson for the Kabbalah Cafe. Deeper love. There are many strategies in Kabbalistic thought on increasing our love and respect for others. The word for love in Hebrew, ahava, has the same numerical value as the word echad, which means one, understanding the intrinsic unity we have with all mankind. There are three possibilities when dealing with a lack of motivation. It's either a lack of information, a lack of meditation, or the ego is too coarse. Humbling thoughts can break down the ego. Every person's inner soul makeup, background, and circumstances are different. It could be that the person you see as morally deficient is fighting harder than you to sustain their level. And you might be lower than them. That's very humbling. This humility can soften the ego and allow us to be less judgmental. And of course, the being less judgmental is key in learning to be more respectful and to have more respect and to have more love for others. So I'll just leave it there just for a few more moments if anyone wants to take a picture of that. And any additional questions today? If anyone has any additional questions?
Rabbi, would you agree that love is not only acquired, it's taught?
Yes, that is true. That is true. Okay, we're gonna share here. Okay, so want to thank everyone for joining. Rivka would like to say good morning to everyone. Rivka, say good morning. Say good morning.
Sunshine.
Okay, and everyone should have a wonderful day. Lots of blessings, success in all that you do. Okay, a wonderful week to everyone.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you,
Thank
Rabbi.
you, Rabbi.
Thank you.